Hello and welcome back to Game of the Week, a series where I bring you the best and worst the DPL Season 10 has to offer. In here I would usually go into a typical rant about some of the stupid stuff that happened this week. This week didn't really have a lot of that. Well, except for Elite Grade Tusk doing this in Game 8. That's it. That's the funny stuff this week. So, getting into our game of choice, it was also just a weird week in general. The options felt a little few and far between. However, the game we have still a pretty good watch, as we get to see Benja Boy's debut in DPL as part of the Draft Dodgers as he takes on Hedja of Judgment Day, as we make our return to SV for Game of the Week. It makes sense we'll be here the most often because that's where the most games are played. If you guys are enjoying the Game of the Week content, please do let me know in all the good old YouTube ways. And let's break this matchup down, because there's a few interesting aspects that carry in quite nicely to the game itself. Hedja's team consists of Great Tusk, Roaring Moon, Petulant, Mesprit, Thunderous Incarnate, along with Ninetales, Arachnid, and Metagross, with Great Tusk and Thundy having access to Terra, whereas Benja's team consists of Iron Valiant, Iron Shreds, Hydrapple, Hisuian Samurott, Uxie, Rotom, Revavroom, and Typhlosion, with Terras here being Hydrapple, Revavroom, and the Typhlosion. And this is definitely a funky matchup on paper. You would think that Iron Valiant should be able to put in a lot of work, as it can kind of just click buttons, and the only one that really scares it out is Metagross, and maybe a T-Wave from a Thundy. And it's also just a really not a good time for Hedja's Petulant here, as between Uxie, Hisuian Samurott, Valiant, Shreds, and even Rotom, there's just not a lot of mons that this thing's going to thrive against. Hedja in general kind of struggles to make offensive progress here, depending on the Hydrapple's Terra type. Although, you could see something like Thundy or Great Tusk clicking buttons. However, I do think that Benja is a favourite here. He has the offensive pressure, and I think even something like Typhlosion could be a good bring, because the fire resists aren't exactly amazing, and it might force Hedja to bring the Arachnid, which feels quite favourable into some of his other mons. As I mentioned in the intro, this is Benja's DPL debut, and this is a season where we have a lot of new guys, and this is what happens every DPL year. So it's nice to kind of feature some debuts for the first time. And he's been doing fairly alright for himself recently, even getting some new time in teams for other Smoke tours, such as World Cup. So that's enough about the matchup. There's not a huge amount to say. I think Benja's favored, but we all know what Judgment Day are capable of when it comes to SV and some crazy prep, and I think Hedja very much fits into that mold. So let's get out of this matchup talk and let's get into the battle itself. We get into team preview here, and there's not too many surprises. As I mentioned, Hedja is a little bit forced to bring the Arachnid because of he needs the water type for mons such as Tusk and even Typhlosion. Whereas Benja does actually opt to bring the Revavroom, which kind of implies that his idea is to pressure a lot of the bulk that wouldn't deal with the Revavroom, meaning they can kind of maybe late game clean with a shift gear, especially since it can set up on something like Northern Ninetales for free because Hypnosis is banned. And overall, looks like it makes a lot of sense. Hedja has opted to bench the Petulant, which is not too surprising, and Benja's opted to bench Rotom, which I guess is a little bit of a surprise, because obviously you can spin block the Tusk, especially since he didn't opt for the Terrafire Temper Flare route to get around it. And overall, Rotom looked pretty okay into Tusk plus Metagross plus Thundy. But, it's their call, not mine. So let's get into this game and see how it all pans out. Oh, before I forget, as we see Elite Samurott into Roaring Moon, we do see a Terra Fairy from the Great Tusk, as well as the Thundy T, meaning that he does not want that Hydrapple to be staying around if he keeps its Dragon typing. And Fairy is a fairly alright click in general. And then we see Terra Grass on the Hydrapple, meaning it's more likely to be an offensive variant, and we see Terra Dark on the Revavroom, which I assume is Terra Blast related to get through a mon like the Metagross or the Petulant. So we see Samurott lead into Roaring Moon, and we see a hard swap into Uxie, taking a knockoff and getting rid of the Culver Berry. We see Taunt to stop any T-Wave or Rocks, as we see Rocks getting clicked, And a U-turn means that this UC is very weakened very quickly, U-turning out on the Metagross, as Hisuian Samrock gets back in. We see a Ceaseless Edge miss, because that's what Ceaseless Edge does, as Hedja gets up rocks essentially for free. Roaring Moon comes in to take the next Ceaseless Edge, doing 28. We see a knockoff getting the crit, getting rid of the weakness policy, as another Ceaseless Edge is clicked here. And I think that's interesting. I think the idea was to catch something like an Araquanid coming in on the U-turn, but Hedja was fairly smart to make sure that he didn't give him the weakness policy with ease. And I think Benja made that maybe a little bit too obvious on lead, but I don't know. It was a fair click, but you can tell that Hedja's in control, even with some of the early game hacks. So Benja is kind of forced to sack off his UC here to the U-turn, but he does have 2 layers of spikes up, and that's gonna matter, except this Araquanid is rocking heavy-duty boots. We see another Ceaseless Edge as he's prioritizing his 3 layers of spikes in exchange for 2 Mons, which is a trade that I'm not sure is 100% worth, and very much depends on Hedja's heavy-duty boots usage, especially since Great Tusk could in theory sack itself off later, just to get the spin. Although, that might make Revavroom a little bit scary. We see the Valiant come in here, which is going to click Encore, as Bug Buzz does a grand total of 13. Metagross comes in here and takes 3 layers of spikes, and a Shadow Ball from a Life Orb Valiant and dying instantly. And that changes the complexion of the game a little bit, because no Metagross means the Hydrapple is a hell of a lot scarier, and it also means that Dual Stab from Rev is only checked by the Great Tusk. Although Ninetales is the mod to come in of choice, which reveals to be Boots, takes a Life Orb Moonblast, and gets up Veil, and sacking itself off later, which it very much depends on. He's very much going to go for Kane right now with something like Thunder, you would think. Maybe Tusk, but it's definitely an interesting play to make. We see the Great Tusk come in here, which reveals to not be Boots, and is going to Terra and Rapid Spin on this turn. Taking only 28, which is kind of crazy. Would make you think it's Assault Vest. We see the Vacuum Wave do a grand total of 5, as an EQ picks off this Iron Valiant. Hydrapple comes in here, and you would expect to see Terra Grass, as Hedja goes Roaring Moon to take the Leaf Storm, doing 31, proving to be quite an offensive Hydrapple, as we see another Life Orb. Knockoff gets rid of said Life Orb, as Fickle Beam picks off the Roaring Moon. So Thundurus comes in here from Hedja, and immediately just clicks Focus Blast, taking out the Hydrapple. Revavroom comes in here from Benja, and it takes a T-Bolt with relative ease, and just Gunk Shots immediately, revealing yet another Life Orb. Great Tusk comes in, another Gunk Shot, connects, down goes the Great Tusk, and all that's left is a 46% Araquanid that dies to yet another Gunk Shot, as the 3rd Life Orb Mon is what gets it done, as Benja takes the win. It was definitely an interesting game. Benja very much had the offensive control right after he sacked the 2 Mons to Spikes. I think Hedja messed up. I do. I think Veil was not necessary at the time that he clicked it, and I'm also not 100% sure about his decision to Terra the Tusk when he did. I think if he does just go ahead and Moonblast that Valiant immediately, this game is a little bit easier, because you have a full health Tusk, and if Revavroom comes in, you can sack the Ninetales to get a Veil. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world. You can do that, and then you have Great Tusk afterwards, and potentially he had Encore. I don't know the full set, but I do think that there was a better way around that. The Spikes pressure did pay off, even if it did kind of cost Benja 2 Mons, but that's just because he had a bunch of Life Orb breakers to get through it. Valiant getting through the Metagross and the Ninetales was pretty pivotal, and Hydrapple did force some pressure to the stage where Revavroom in an easy cleanup job provided it hit, and it hit for Benja this week. So that is the Week 5 Game of the Week. There's only 2 more weeks left in the regular season, which is kind of flying in. So, we still have some more games to go ahead. I hope you all have been enjoying this Game of the Week series, and I'll catch us next week, where maybe we'll see a little bit more going on. Hope you've enjoyed, guys. Peace!